As well as retrieving and updating database records, you can use LINQ to add new records using a similar technique. In this lesson, you'll use LINQ to make a new invoice page functional. To begin, open the Spark project from your sample files folder. And view new transaction.aspx in Design View. This web page is not yet functional. Eventually, you'll be able to choose a customer from the drop-down list and add a new customer invoice. Open the code behind file of new transaction.aspx now. Find the else statement on this page and add a new using statement inside it that creates an instance of the Spark Data Context class. Using Spark Data Context data equals new Spark Data Context. Next, you're going to create a new instance of the invoice class. In previous lessons, you've retrieved an invoice object from the database by using the Spark Data Context class. In this lesson, you want to add a new invoice, so you need to create a new instance of the invoice class. To do this, add the following code: invoice new invoice equals new invoice. As you'll recall from lesson 6.10, this code creates a new instance of the invoice class called new invoice. Next, you'll need to set the properties of the new invoice. Add the following code on the next line: new invoice dot customer ID equals 5. The customer dropdown isn't functional yet, so you're setting the customer ID manually for now to test the page. In lesson 11.2, you'll configure the customer dropdown to automatically retrieve every customer from the database. Now add the following code to set the rest of the properties of the new invoice. New invoice dot invoice number equals text box invoice number dot text. New invoice dot invoice amount equals convert dot to decimal text box amount dot text. New invoice dot invoice tax amount equals convert dot to decimal text box tax amount dot text. And add the following code to set the date and time. New invoice dot invoice date equals date time dot now. If you examine this code, you'll notice that the names of the controls on the page closely match the names of the properties in the database. This is best practice. If a control is used to display or set a value in a database, its name should match the name of the database field it displays or sets. When setting the properties, you might also have noticed that there's an invoice ID property that you didn't set. Invoice ID is the table's unique primary key, which is automatically maintained by the database. In most well-designed databases, the primary key is automatically managed and doesn't need to be set manually. Next, you'll need to tell LINQ to send the data to the database. Just creating an invoice object and calling the Submit Changes method isn't enough. You need to specifically tell LINQ to insert a new record. Tell LINQ which record to insert into the invoice table with the following code: data.invoices.insertOnSubmit new invoice, and call the submitChanges method to insert the record. Data.submitChanges. Note that as well as inserting a single invoice object using the InsertOnSubmit method, you can insert a collection of invoice objects by using the InsertAllOnSubmit method. Next, you're going to add some code to inform the user that the invoice was added successfully. Add the following code on the next line. Panel add invoice dot visible equals false. Panel confirm added dot visible equals true. This code will hide the form containing the new invoice details and show a panel that contains some confirmation text. Test your code now by viewing newtransaction.aspx in your web browser and completing the form. Note that you don't need to select a customer. After completing the form, click Submit. Your new invoice is submitted and the confirmation message is shown. Close your web browser now and close Visual Studio. You've now completed Lesson 10.8. Insert database records using LINQ.